So this morning is the 21st meeting of the 46th year of Rotary Club of Dublin and Worthington. Today's invocation and Pledge of Allegiance will be offered by Shirley.
Let us pray. We pray for an end to the violence and destruction that occurred at our nation's capital. It's time to return to core values and be kind and thoughtful. May the angry voices be heard in a peaceful way, and the transition of a political party be safe and secure without fear. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice
for all.
Jim, you're muted.
Steve, could you introduce any guests and also any visiting Rotarians?
Sure. Looks to me that we don't have any guests other than our speaker, who will be introduced later by Joe Patchen. And I do not see any visiting Rotarians. So with that, I will go straight into happy dollars. Who's got a happy dollar? Somebody's got to have a happy dollar.
I have a happy dollar. It's Teresa.
Go for it.
In December, we actually finalized our last driver. My daughter Nicole got her driver's license, so now we're struggling with 4 cars in the driveway.
Whoa.
Congrats and good luck.
But the freedom is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Katie, it seems to me she needs a new house with a big garage.
Yep, definitely. She needs a new house.
That's called college.
Yeah. Downsizing, right, Teresa? Downsizing.
Right.
Rachel, go ahead.
I didn't announce that Alex last semester got his Fire 2 card, and he is going back to school to get an associate's degree for firefighting this the 19th. He'll go back to Columbus State, and he should keep on going. He likes the action, but he's struggling with school, but he's going back. So one step at a time.
Right on. Very exciting.
That's great.
I'll take one more, and I'm surprised nobody's talked about the Browns yet.
I have a happy dollar. It's not about the Browns, though.
Go for it.
My son's back to hybrid, so he is enjoying seeing his friends again instead of via Zoom. So happy dollar for him.
Cool.
Can I have a happy dollar, Steve?
I'll allow it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm happy that when I do go to Florida Saturday, that I'll be able to listen to, as long as you're on Zoom, Rotary and my church. So that'll be something. But I'm also looking forward to when I can't. But I'm happy about Worthington Presbyterian Church. I'm on a committee with Tom Rice's wife, Betsy, and despite being closed down since March, and we got 8 new members, so we're proud of that. I'm on membership and fellowship with Betsy, so I'm really proud of that. They joined by Zoom, so that's really something. So anyway, that's my story.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good things going on in the new year for everybody, so that's great. Jim, I'll turn it back over to you for announcements.
Yes, are there any announcements with the new year?
I have an announcement. It's Katie. Just wanted to say that we do have a LinkedIn page, a Facebook page, and an Instagram page now for communications. So we will be featuring that, or not featuring, but we'll be having that in our newsletter so people can follow and do that type of stuff. We're also going to look for people who want to talk about their committees also. So to put it into the newsletter. So if you would like to have your committee featured, let us know and we'll get it in there. All right, thank you.
I do want to announce that we'll be holding a joint scholarship committee meeting on Thursday with the Worthington AM Club. It is a joint venture that's quite exciting, and we will have further information a little later, probably the end of the month or early February. We'll have a little more information about that joint venture to offer full scholarships for 2 years to students. It's a new way that we're going to be looking at scholarship as a club for high schoolers. Any other announcements? Okay.
Yeah, I got one actually. So to all the board members and committee chairs that are on this meeting, later this week, I'm going to be sending out an email to try and schedule a training for board members and committee chairs about how to use DACDB, how to schedule in Zoom, how to even coordinate a meeting. So that if you've got 5 or 6 people and you need to find a time, I've got a little clever tool that we can use for that. So I'm anticipating either a lunch, not on a Wednesday, either a lunch or like a 5 to 6 o'clock meeting time, but I will send more information about that. I'm hoping as many people can attend as possible so that as a club, our board members and committee chairs are all on the same page about how to share information and use the tools that we need to manage our committees and club at large. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I
And I
encourage
have a,
everyone, the committee chair and a board member, or a board member, to participate in that. It's tools that we can use, especially during COVID, to really coordinate better our club, and it gives opportunities to contact with each other. Any other announcements?
I just have a quick comment. The Dublin AM Club is hosting their Polar Bear Open on February 6th, Saturday, and I signed up with a couple of other groups. So just want to put the word out. If anybody wants to join in the Polar Bear Open, should be fun.
Yes, and that is, they've, especially the Dublin AM Club, that's exciting that they're able to do some fundraising, because it was quite challenging because they lost their 2 major fundraisers because of COVID. I'd encourage anyone to participate. Well, today's speaker is going to be introduced by Joe Patchen. Joe?
Thank you, Jim. Mary Angela Miller is a registered and licensed dietitian, and she's known as the food safety dietitian. And she's going to be presenting a discussion today entitled "Protect Your Plate: Tips from the Food Safety Dietitian." We've come to understand that our speakers generally know what they're doing, but are expert on their topics. And I think you'll admit that's the case here. Mary comes to us with a background of 15 years as the Food and Nutrition Services Director for the OSU Wexner Medical Center. That's a lot of meals served. The 13 years as the OSU Hospital Administrator and an adjunct professor in the OSU College of Medicine. So she's also advised her industry nationally and been associated with industry groups. And you can consult her webpage, keepsafefood.com, after this discussion to follow up on what we're going to hear about. Mary comes to us as an introduction from Heather Dugan, whom we heard from in December, and proud to introduce Mary.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Joe. And good morning, everybody. Thanks for making me feel welcome. I'm not a morning person, so I'm glad we had some happy notes today. And we're going to talk about Protect Your Plate. Now, is my screen being shared?
Not right now.
Not yet?
Nope.
Okay, let me see if I can get that started for us.
It's that green share screen button. Yep, there it is.
Okay, great, thank you. So we will talk today about Protect Your Plate. And it's interesting because, of course, I get excited about food safety, but friends have told me that no one in the world is as interested in food safety, Mary, as you are. But I think COVID has changed all that, right? I sit in a lot of different industry groups, I do a lot with restaurants in terms of food safety training. We may have people on this call, who are in restaurant business or in food in one way or another, and you'll be familiar with some of what I have to say today, I'm sure. But one of the groups that I work with that does trends in restaurants across the country, Data Central, shared this with us in March. And it was really within a few weeks after the lockdown, because they survey consumers nationally all the time for the National Restaurant Association and other corporate meetings that we have. And for the first time ever, safety eclipsed both taste and sustainability in consumer interest. So we really have seen the impact that COVID has had on interest in food safety. And I think what else has gone along with that is people have educated themselves about COVID, even those who have no interest in science, right? I love science. It was my favorite subject. That's why I went into nutrition. It's really, I think, helped them educate and understand the role that food safety has and how it works. So we'll talk a little bit about that, of course, today. All right. So some of these pictures you see, I wear the apron. I wear the apron in honor of my mom, who was an amazing cook and baker. She cooked not only for our family of 10 children, she also cooked out of our tiny kitchen for the whole convent across the street. And so you just grew up knowing good food, loving good food, and taking good food for granted. Unfortunately, I did not inherit her ability. I wish I was a better cook, let me just say it that way. But I think I went into nutrition so that I could hang out with chefs and at least have access to their great food. And as Joe mentioned, I've been in the industry a long time. I was food service director for the medical center for many, many years. I was a clinical dietitian at Cleveland Clinic. I ran a very successful weight management program here in Columbus when we relocated here. And when I retired from the medical center I work part-time now as an adjunct instructor, I launched this business, Keep Safe Food, to help people protect their plate at home. And that's because of a lot of what I learned during those years at the medical center. Because we serve a lot of meals there, right? We have thousands of patients we serve every day. And if you're not familiar with hospitals and how they work in terms of food, we actually serve a lot more meals to staff and visitors than we do to patients. So we actually run 14 restaurants in 7 hospitals at the medical center. We have over 30 chefs. I hired the first one back in 1991, my second year as food service director. 50 dietitians, 300 staff. You're just serving food everywhere and all the time. And I would like to say that because of that, you get inspected all the time. And over all those many years, even with our high-risk patients who are much more susceptible to foodborne illness than you or I, we never had a hint of a foodborne illness or what we call food poisoning. Okay, so you'll see me refer to that here as an FBI. That doesn't mean, though, that the potential is not there. The potential is always there. And we take it very, very seriously. And that's because if you are a licensed food service operation, if any two people come to you with a complaint of the same origin, we have to launch an investigation. We have to report it to the health department. We take foodborne illness very, very seriously. But one of the things that I learned was that just because we do, even people who, I don't want to say should know better because none of us can know everything, but people, even very smart people, don't really know a lot about food safety. And we need to know enough to keep our food safe at home. And I'm going to tell you why I think that. Because whenever somebody felt they had food poisoning, they would come to me, and these were calls as a food service director. Your heart would start hammering, you're like, oh my gosh, did something happen? And, somebody would come in and say, I need to talk to you. And they'd sit down in your office and they'd say, well, I think I got food poisoning, from something I ate in the cafe yesterday. And so, of course, I have to sit there and listen and ask and say, no, why do you think that? I've got to find out what's going on. And it never failed. Over all those years, whenever somebody had a suspicion that they had a foodborne illness, they always thought these three things. So I kind of call them the assumptions. One, they thought it was a particular food, say like, oh, it must have been the hamburger I got off the grill. They always thought it was the last meal that they ate, but not necessarily the last meal that they ate time-wise. They always thought it was the last meal that they ate when they were away from home. They never looked to that it could have been something they had for dinner last night, not for lunch yesterday in the cafe. That just always seemed to be the suspicion. So that really made me realize there was an opportunity to help people be educated to protect their plates at home. And we're going to talk today about those assumptions, away from home, your last meal, your particular food. We're also going to talk about the three things that cause foodborne illness. And then, of course, because we're talking about protecting your plate, I want to talk about, the 4 simple ways to prevent them. Because really, once you have it, all you can do is treat it. It's better to try and prevent them as much as possible. And we're going to talk about that away from home one first, because certainly, a foodborne illness can happen away from home. I talked a little bit about, just my job at Ohio State. We served millions of meals. We had hundreds of servers. We had 3,000 patient meals we were serving every day. 8,000 staff would come into one of our retail establishments. On any given day, we'd do 25 different catered events. So just by the sheer number, just by the sheer volume, just by the sheer handoffs that you do, you're going to have more of a chance if there is a problem with foodborne illness that it's going to happen because of the scope. Now, we don't have a lot of good data on this, but in general, based on what we know, it's anywhere that 60-40, 70-30 foodborne illnesses might happen away from home versus at home. But the primary reason for that is just because of the scale and the sheer numbers. Remember, restaurants are inspected and licensed. That doesn't mean they're perfect, but most of our homes are not inspected and licensed. So we look quickly at the causes of foodborne illness, and there are 3: chemical, physical, biological. I'm going to zip through the first 2, and then we'll talk a lot about the third one. Because chemical, the one thing we learn in food service is always label your food. One of the courses that I did for other food service directors in food safety many years ago, my colleague at Doctors at Hospital and I did it, we collected every white powder from our kitchens. We had over 30. And many of these you have at home, many of those you might not. You probably don't have rat poison. You probably do have dish detergent though. And when you have all these people, everybody's using the supplies, it's absolutely essential that you label food at home and you label food in a restaurant. And I'm just going to give you one example, although it's not a white powder example. A friend of mine was helping me get my house ready when I was moving. And we had to do something to treat, as part of the inspection process. It was an older home. And we had to treat some of the wood that was weathered with this chemical. He's an engineer. He brought me this product. He was working on one part of the house. I was working on the other. It was a hot summer day. I walk outside. Hot day, I like a Diet Coke in the afternoon. Picked up this bottle of Diet Coke and realized that is what he had put the whatever wood treatment he had brought to our house in it. And, you know, on a hot day when you're distracted, you might not even think. So I always encourage people always to label their items. And certainly in food service, we have to do that. Because if those chemical food items get in your food, they can make you sick. Physical means that something got in your food that shouldn't be there, like metal or glass shavings. I share this picture of my petite chef knife, which I love because I'm a small person and it's a pretty small knife, although it looks bigger in that picture. Making Sunday dinner for my family, because this is one of our traditions that we keep up. I use that knife to try and separate frozen chicken breasts. Yes, I should know better. And then when I pulled the knife out, I noticed the tip was gone. Well, that's 45 minutes of my life I'll never get back, because you spent the whole time, right? The whole time looking for that, because I didn't know, should I throw the whole thing away? But I certainly wasn't going to serve that chicken to my family, knowing that there was a sharp knife tip in it. So we have to be very, very careful about the physical contamination of food. But the third one is biological. And that's the one, the big one that we tend to think of when we think of foodborne illness. That's the one that makes you sick. So it's harmful in that way rather than just cutting you or having a chemical reaction. The thing that I want to mention here is that there are over 30 different pathogens or germs that can cause a foodborne illness. They can be bacteria, they can be a virus, they can be a toxin. However, depending on what that bacteria is or what that germ is, depending on how much of it is in perhaps the food that you ate, depending on your health status. So some people, pregnant women, children, anybody whose immune function is compromised, say getting chemotherapy, they're much more susceptible. So the symptoms, depending on which germ and which of those other factors are in place, can occur an hour after you eat. And some of them, like hepatitis, can not show up for 28 days. So this whole assumption that it was your last meal could be your last meal, right? But it could have been something that you ate more than 2 weeks ago. And when we do have an outbreak of foodborne illness and we try and do that tracing, you know how hard that is? Who remembers what they ate 3 days ago, let alone, 2 weeks ago? So the biological pathogens are the big ones that we have to be concerned about and that we should most be worried about at home. So that may have been your last meal is one of your assumptions, but it certainly may have been a meal that you ate 3 weeks ago. Now, prior to COVID-19, the foodborne illnesses were reported by the CDC as something that they thought to be the #1 preventable public health problems. 1 in 6 of us will get one this year. And it is, they can make you sick, but they also can be deadly. Also, be aware that most foodborne illnesses go unreported. Remember what I said, if it's a healthcare institution or a restaurant, 2 or more people, then sure, that might be reported. But if you just got sick at home and recovered the next day, that's not going to be reported, right? But it can be very, very serious. We know that at least 128,000 hospitalizations from diagnosed foodborne illnesses and over 3,000 deaths. And we look at that in terms of lost productivity. And these are 2018 numbers of 6.9 billion. This is my colleague, Barb Kowalczyk. Barb is the director of the Center for Foodborne Illness and Prevention at Ohio State. This is Barb and her son, Kevin, who died of an E. coli infection when he was a child. So Barb changed her whole career path, created this center, and actually brought it to OSU. And they do a lot of tremendous research on foodborne illness and its prevention around the world. But however, mine is much more practical than that. As a food safety person, as an operator, my goal was to help people protect their plates at home. And one of the ways then that I thought to do this was, in the industry, we have all these tools. I have thermometer measuring systems and record keeping processes and test kits, et cetera. But at home, I would say it's a little more, there's great information out there, but there's not really the basic tools packaged as a kit to help you keep food safe at home. And that was part of why I wanted to start Keep Safe Food, because information is not enough. And I actually looked to what the CDC did when Zika, and I don't know if you remember back to Zika, probably 6 years ago was the main concern with Zika, but it was, a infestation caused by mosquitoes that was causing very, very severe birth defects. And when this started to hit the American territories, the CDC got involved, and they really had to go out to the high-risk areas and give people kits, mosquito nettings, et cetera, to help them prevent that. Just educating people without the kit didn't do much good. So what I tried to do in the kit is gives you for something in each of these 4 basics of food safety that I said we would talk about. Clean, there's hand sanitizer, separate, there's different chopping mats so that you don't cross-contaminate one food with another. If you don't already, I would encourage you to get a good food thermometer. Why? Because if you have a crummy one, you never use it. If you have a good one, there's no excuses. Chill, we'll talk about safe food storage. And finally, I just try and be sustainable, and instead of using packaging that you're going to pitch, it's a reusable insulated tote. So let's go into those 4 things that help us prevent foodborne illness at home. Clean. Just to talk a little bit about clean and COVID-19. COVID-19 is not a foodborne illness. If you eat COVID-19, you probably won't get it. If you breathe it, if you touch your eyes, as you know, you might, but it is not a foodborne illness. However, it is a virus. So for those who are concerned about the virus, the same prevention principles apply for preventing a foodborne illness from a virus as preventing a COVID-19 as a virus. So just keep that in mind. Also remember that food is not sterile. It's not meant to be sterile. So even though we talk about cleaning, food, unless it's going to be high pressurized, canned food or sous vide, it's not sterile. Fresh food is not sterile. Fresh food is good for you. I'm a dietitian. We think everybody should eat more fresh food, but just keep in mind that it's not sterile. So which foods will make you sick? I like to talk about this a lot because people, I find, based on the questions or the things they say to me, tend to be very confused about spoiled food and unsafe food. And I would just ask you, which of these 2 batches of tomatoes would be most likely to cause an FBI? I don't worry about the ones on the left. Who would eat those? They're gross, they're disgusting, they look bad. Now, is that mold one that would make you sick? I don't know, but that's spoiled food, which will happen to fresh food over time. It's just the natural process of ripening. It may or may not make you sick. It's the tomatoes on the right that may have listeria or E. coli on them based on the way they were grown. That's the ones that can make you sick. So we always say, use good sanitation practices. Don't trust your senses. How many times will I get a call and they say, well, I tasted this and it didn't taste bad, so it must be okay. Think about this. When I talked about the COVID-19 as a way to educate consumers a little bit about science for those that aren't in the field, I'm just going to use an example in my family. My sister was hospitalized between Christmas and New Year's. She has a lot of underlying medical conditions. She wheezes, she coughs. She tested negative for COVID, but obviously still sick, okay? But nobody was going near her. My brother-in-law is he's a nursing home administrator, so obviously a high-risk job. And right now he's filling a role when they have gaps. He'll go and be a temporary one to keep that place running. Say if their director's out for COVID, a true healthcare hero, right? So he gets tested like every other day and he's very, very careful. Well, of course, he tested positive, not a single symptom, nothing during the whole 10 to 14 days he quarantined. So I kind of use that as the analogy to the spoiled food versus unsafe food. Don't trust your senses, always practice good technique. So when we get into this, because we're talking about clean and the particular food, these are the foods that germs love. They have favorites too. We tend to think, of course, about poultry and salmonella, which is one of the biological contaminants or biological organisms, and ground beef and E. coli. But actually, the major foodborne illnesses tend to be caused by melons, tomatoes, and greens, believe it or not. Why? They may not kill you, but they can make you sick. And you can see some of the outbreaks we had with melon. These were over the last 2 years. I looked at the biggest ones. It was 147 cases, 33 deaths. And then sprouts, we can see many, many cases and 53 deaths. And both of those had to do with cleaning. Why? How are you going to clean sprouts? If they're contaminated, Rinsing them just spreads whatever germs in there all around. So many restaurants stopped serving fresh sprouts after this outbreak. Now melons, people say, why melons? Melons because of the surface. Melons often grow on the ground, and that corrugated surface allows many, if there's say E. coli in that soil, it's going to be dirty. It's hard to clean. And if you don't wash the melon, and if you don't wash your knife, if you have the organism on the outside, then you slice it right into the middle, you chop up that melon, you put it in a fruit salad, and it can be deadly. And these are the other items that are most likely to cause a foodborne illness. I just threw this up there because there's so much education out there now about cleaning and just the difference between cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. Cleaning is something that removes the soil, sanitizing reduces the bacteria, and then when you get into the what I would call the organizational level, we're actually using disinfectant, which destroys the bacteria. But fortunately, things like scrubbing your hands will get rid of the coronavirus bacteria. The soap actually takes those little nodules off and washes them down the drain. If you're using hand sanitizer, make sure it's 60% alcohol or more. And I just like to share this sweet little bouquet a friend of mine brought me during the early stages of the outbreak when I could find neither disinfectant wipes or toilet paper. I call it my coronavirus sweetheart bouquet. Early on, I'm sure many of you remember this, when we first started to deal with the COVID pandemic, there was crazy stuff out there about surfaces. We've learned a lot about COVID since then, and surfaces are not nearly the contact or the contamination method we thought they were. But people were doing things like trying to sanitize their groceries before they brought them in the home. We've learned a lot about no need to do that anymore. Yes, practice food safety. You don't need to disinfect your groceries with bleach. However, one thing that this made me think about, because I actually did a post on my blog on high touch areas in the home. So when you want to clean, things to think about. And I realized when I walked in from the grocery store with dirty feet from everywhere, I'm short, I have a stool in every home in my house. I came in the kitchen to put my groceries away and I was touching this filthy stool. So I did realize that I had to add that to my cleaning regime, especially if my hands were going to touch it and then touch food. So that brings us to the next one, which is separate your food. Because even if one food is contaminated, you don't want to spread it to another food, as I mentioned, like with that melon in a fruit salad. So separation just simply means that, keep food separate. And one of the ways that we get cross-contamination is not from the food, it's from the server. So you see this, like the chef or this expediter in a restaurant is finishing this plate and he sneezes on the pork chop. This, I think looks like maybe a chicken fillet on the right. And then he touches or his sneeze goes over to the right. You can have people who ate two very different foods get a foodborne illness, right? Because the contaminant was from the server, not the food itself. And that's why our assumption that it may or may not have been a particular food may or may not be correct. So we should make sure that at home you have the tools that you need to keep food separate. And a big one is have separate chopping mats. So I kind of love, I'm one of those people that kind of loves cutting boards and chopping mats, but I don't have a lot of room. I have a small kitchen now. So I have these neat little chopping mats that are easy to wash that you can just use 5 when you're making a salad or trying to, this is my salsa, my rainbow salsa recipe where I'm using a lot of different things. And then they're just much easier to store and you can put them right in the dishwasher. So I encourage people to keep separate chopping mats. The big one, of course, is cooking. Here again, never trust your senses. Cook your foods to a safe temperature. Don't rely on your instincts, rely on a thermometer, okay? When we get inspected at a restaurant, that's the first thing the inspector does. They'll come in many places we have food, stick their thermometer into a steam table or stick their thermometer into a food that's going to go to a patient. And believe me, if it's not at the right temp, you can bet, and we would deserve it, a citation right then. So most foods you want to cook to at least 145. Some have to go to 180. And that's because most bacteria grow well in this range here, 40 to 140, 41 to 140 really. So if you cook above that, you will kill most of the bacteria that were in germs, okay? Viruses, as I mentioned, the COVID is a virus. So we haven't done a lot of studies on COVID in food, but we do know that COVID-like viruses are inactivated at 150 degrees. So if you cook your food to 150 or really at one, and should be killed at 160, if you're worried about COVID in food, if you cook to that temperature, you should be okay. The other thing is if you're using a thermometer for more than one food, be sure to wipe it off in between so that you don't contaminate one food to the other. Again, I encourage you to take a temperature. Why? Because even though you might be the greatest grill chef in the world, every fire is different, every steak is different. And remember, every guest who eats that steak is unique. So you may eat it because you're young and robust and healthy and fine. And somebody might be at your picnic table who is not, whether you know it or not. And if the food isn't cooked to the right temperature, it can create an issue for them. Okay, one other note about cooking. Early, I don't know, we all have different survival mechanisms for COVID, but when you go to I got this from one of my card club groups. They talked about the 14 days of quarantine, and day 8, they sent this out and it said, I went to a new restaurant today. We called it The Kitchen. You have to gather all your ingredients and make your own meal. I have no clue how this place stays in business. So my #1 prediction is the cooking skill that will be acquired during the coronavirus for many, many people is reheating. And it's reheating for up to 1 minute. And that's if you are doing microwave reheating. Microwaves are not magic. The reason you have to cook for 165 for 1 minute is that most foods that are reheated have already been out in that danger zone for a while. You don't want them out there for more than 2 hours. So they really should get up to 165 for 1 minute. And for many, many people, they're now using their kitchens they never did before, and they just need to know how to reheat safely. Okay, chill is the next one. Chill doesn't kill, it preserves. So you talk about the vaccines that are coming out. How are they shipping them? Cold, right? Because cold preserves. So don't rely on chilling to kill your bacteria, it preserves it. One other thing I want to tell you about chilling is fridge happens, right? This is actually a picture, and it's fun with this food safety because I get the craziest questions. My daughter said this to me. My daughter, this is her refrigerator in Arizona. She was away for a 3-day weekend. She came home and she said, Mom, the power went out. Everything in my freezer melted. And it looks to me like she's a serial killer, right? And the body's is leaking out onto the floor. What do I do? And I think, Joe, we talked about that. When your fridge goes out, what do you do? Well, 41 degrees is your magic number. And remember, it doesn't go, if your refrigerator goes out, everything doesn't turn to 41 right away, right? It takes a couple hours to go down, but then it also takes a couple hours to reheat. But if you can get it back into a safe environment or a chilled environment within 2 hours, you'll probably be okay. As for a freezer, I told her to cook, some things we just threw away, and other things, depending on what they were, we walked through her freezer item by item. I said, you can chill, you can cook this right away and then refreeze it and it'll be safe to use. Now get 2 questions all the time. The first one I get is, does the 5-minute rule or the 5-second rule really valid? Well, it depends. The second one is, how long can I keep something in the fridge? I really created this little magnet to help people with that. But in general, if it's a food or a leftover, 4 days, throw away. So there we have it. The chemical, the physical, and the biological causes of food. The biologicals are bacteria, viruses, and toxins. I hope I've expanded your assumptions about what causes foodborne illness. Could be a particular food, could be different foods that have been cross-contaminated. Could have been your last meal, could have been something you ate 3 weeks ago. Could have been away from home. It could have been something that you consumed right at your own table. Also, to encourage you to clean, separate, cook, chill at home. Cleaning and separating prevents the spread of foodborne illness or bacteria. Cooking inactivates it, and chilling slows the growth. But remember, it will preserve any bacteria that's in there. We'll move on to questions, but we all have different coping strategies, I say, for getting through this virus. I've done a lot of talks with food safety directors around the country on COVID and food safety. And when I talk to them, because certainly they've been under stress, they're handling the food piece and they're handling it in a high-risk environment, what they do to decompress. And these are just all the things that they shared with me. Mine is word games. I love word games. So I got into the, word game apps as one way to fill my time. And I could not believe, this is my favorite app, the Word Master app, but I could not believe one time, here I am trying to play COVID, and it came up as an invalid attempt. Can you believe that? COVID is not in the dictionary. So that was my question. Now I'll open them up to yours. Would you like me to stop screen sharing?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, I will do that.
You had mentioned that it preserves in a freezer or another environment. So whatever, if you leave, Five Eye Chicken or something else at the grocery store, and it's been out for more than 2 hours or whatever, then there is some risk or danger to that, correct?
2 hours for home use is the absolute limit that we would recommend for food in the temperature danger zone, because the bacteria, if there's anything in that chicken, it's going to, it can multiply, right? And you can't measure that. Now, if it's unfroze, like if it's fresh chicken you just brought home from the store, you're going to cook that. So you'll get some degree of safety when you cook it. But say you've already cooked that chicken and then you left it out in a buffet for 2 hours. 2 hours is the maximum. I would have my temperature and check it. I always, when I entertain, I set my little phone to remind me that I either need to change out the food that I have or put the food that's been out for a while in the fridge. But if it's at the 2 hour limit and then you refrigerate it, just be sure to cook it to 165 when you reheat it again. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
One other thing I want to mention, Jim, because you brought up poultry. I think some tests have told us about 20% of fresh poultry has salmonella. It's just a normal thing that's there. Never wash your chicken. Never wash your poultry. It does nothing for you but spread those germs all over the kitchen. You're going to kill the salmonella by cooking it. You're not going to do anything by washing it. You probably will spread it, but you certainly won't prevent anything because you're going to cook the salmonella, which kills it.
I have a question.
Sure.
And it's about salad. Sometimes when we eat salads, it's fine, and others cause a problem. Is it because of the chemical and the preserves that they put on the lettuce, or what is that from?
Well, that's a good question. So yes, many salad bars will use sulfites, but we're trying to get away from that because it makes the food look good, but people have a reaction to sulfites. So that could be something that's particular to you. The reason there have been so many leafy green outbreaks over the last few years is this. We get a lot of our lettuce in this country from huge farms in California. And those farms, we actually trace this, and it's fascinating if you're a science geek to watch, how the CDC traces it. The fertilization or the water, the irrigation water for those farms comes from other farms that have livestock. So there's E. coli, right, on the farms with livestock. That E. coli, because it's in all of our intestines, including animal intestines, gets into the soil, the water goes downstream, and they're using it to irrigate lettuce, and the lettuce gets contaminated with the E. coli. And it's very, very difficult, as we all know, who washes every lettuce leaf? So that's why this was very, very hard to figure out, and it's also very hard to eradicate. So you just should try and buy from reputable sources, clean the outer leaves. And whenever there's an outbreak, you can always look to see which brands have been identified. So until they clear it up, you use another brand. So it could be a number of things with lettuce. That's an interesting question.
I'm referring to restaurants that serve you a salad too.
Right, right. So again, restaurants, they might be buying pre-processed produce, and hopefully that's been sanitized before they serve it to you, which cuts down on the chances, but it could still happen. I mean, this is not a 100% preventable, but we could certainly reduce the instance. So, am I going to stop eating lettuce? No, but you need to be aware of what you can do to reduce the risk.
Mary, I have a question.
Sure, Shirley.
Okay. Do you feel like, oh, I think all of us have ordered more food to go.
I know I have.
I have too. Do you feel like we should always like microwave that or make sure it's, when you think of getting a salad and you don't, like you're saying, you don't know who sneezed on the food or if they wore gloves when they made the food. And how can we protect ourselves?
So a couple things, right? Because that was a huge concern when we talked about that national survey that said, when safety and sanitation jumped taste and convenience as consumers' number one concern. And a lot of that had to do with delivery drivers, right? And a few, what do we call, urban legends. It may well have been true of people delivering the food. But remember, every place that you're ordering from is licensed and inspected. That's not a guarantee, but at least it means that they have been educated because you have to be ServSafe certified. And I'm a ServSafe certified instructor, so I know what we teach them. And they have to be inspected regularly. But inspections dropped way off during this for the obvious reasons. They also, one of the things the National Restaurant Association did at the launch of this was they gave out free training. The National Restaurant Association runs the biggest food safety training in the country called ServSafe. And they gave out 2 free trainings, and they never give anything away for free, on basic food safety for all workers as a refresher and delivery food safety. And I went on and did both of them. Now they were short, they were probably 10 to 15 minutes, but I thought the safety one was excellent. It hit all the key points for a food safety delivery driver. Now my question is, just because it was available, how many companies required their drivers and their delivery people to do it? That I can't answer, but at least the information was out there for those reputable delivery companies that wanted you to do it. I think many times you can tell when it was made. Sometimes they'll put that on the receipt, you never know. But you have to kind of look at, the time between it got there into your house. Was it kept at a temperature? Was it in an insulated box? But if you have any doubt and it's a cooked food, there's no harm in reheating it.
Okay.
And the thing that I would do is, because leftovers tend to be bigger portions or take out food, bigger portions, and I always get a couple meals out of them. Whatever you don't eat, put away right away. Don't leave it out too long.
Okay.
Good questions. What else?
I want to ask a question that's maybe a little bit off, but last night on the news, I heard this mother tell me that her son, who also happened to have been in Washington, D.C., that he would literally get sick if he didn't eat organically grown food. And of course, where he was being imprisoned, they didn't feed him that food, so he went on a hunger strike, I guess.
Poor baby.
Yeah, poor baby. So I'm just asking you if you've had occasion that people would literally get sick because they ate food that wasn't organically grown.
No. That's my answer, no. But there are certainly food allergens that are specific to people, right? There's ones we call the big 8 that we have to really focus on. And there might be a 9th one added to that called sesame, might be added to the list. And those are individual, but I've never heard of, because what is organic means there's some question about what it means legally, right? But the food, the things that might be on a food that's not grown organically would be like a chemical, correct? So if you have a sensitivity to any chemicals, that could be on there. That could be an issue. But remember that organically grown food is not sterile. If anything, it's got more natural contaminants because it hasn't been sanitized with anything. So I always say you can get a natural foodborne illness with natural foods. You still have to clean them appropriately, just the way the other do. But no, I have never seen from a scientific or from an operator perspective a case of foodborne illness caused by not eating organic food. Now, the other thing to remember is the only real way to identify or diagnose a foodborne illness is through a stool sample. Can't do that through a drive-through testing route, right? And another reason why it's so hard, most of it's like the flu. We just get over it. It's a mild case. So they would have to do, I think, some very medical testing to ascertain if there was really a result of only eating, if you got some kind of illness by not eating. But it could be somebody with some hypersensitivity. That I don't know. Interesting.
Mary, I thought it was interesting that when the restaurants were shut down, then it would be on the news how much they cleaned while they were shutting down.
Right.
And I thought in some ways it was a good thing, because before you were there eating, and then they would show this intensive cleaning going on. And they did clean up their act and and it makes you realize how maybe dirty they were before. So
Shirley, you know, when I mentioned I've done a lot of programs on COVID and food safety, and I still am very much in touch with healthcare food service directors across the country and with programs associated with restaurant operations, because I do food safety training for restaurants. That was a huge emphasis of ours, was that it's not enough to be clean, show your customers that you are clean. So you will see signs posted about their cleaning protocols. They might have always done that, but they never put a sign out there to say we're doing that. You saw their gloves. You saw what maybe even the hostess was demonstrating it. So you are right. We tried to be very, very visible, that we were cognizant of consumer concerns and that we were doing what we needed to do to give you confidence to still eat our food.
Mary, I have a question.
Sure.
We
go ahead.
have sort of inherited a whole lot of meat from a deer that, you know, I know has not been through any standard testing or anything. That's in my my freezer, and I am just reluctant to serve it or to use it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I have to chuckle, because I just resurrected something the other day, many years ago, before I even got into this. Some of you may remember the newspaper Columbus Alive, and it interviewed me on eating roadkill. And I'm like, what? No way. But, you know, well, what if it's fresh roadkill? What if you killed it, you hit it yourself? Well, of course, as a food safety director for Ohio State, I would never go on record to say, yes, it's okay to eat roadkill. But if that's been hunted safely and dressed in what they say is, and I don't know as much about that part of the industry as I do about mine, but if it's been dressed and sectioned off appropriately and packaged appropriately, and then you cook it, and let me check, because it's not a question I get always, what is it for game, right? I'm looking at my mats, because the mats have the safe food temperature right on them. I would say you want to cook that to probably 165, 170, and it should be okay.
Okay.
Don't waste it. We don't want to waste food, right? If you're safe, you can waste less.
Well, I'd be glad to donate it someplace.
Well, you should check that. I know I'm doing a promotion right now with the Worthington Resource Pantry. So with my mats, I'm going to donate mats for them to give out, food safety mats with their food packages based on how many I sell this month. So
thank you. Thank you.
Eat your game.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mary. If you could stick around after we complete the formal meeting to answer any other questions, we would appreciate that.
Jim, I'm all yours this morning. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm here.
And so we can have some informal time after the formal meeting. So next week's speaker will be Gerhard Maroscher, and I may have mispronounced the name, author of Why Can't Somebody Just Die Around Here?, which is his personal account of the miraculous survival of his family during World War II in Germany. While he was fleeing, his family fled communism, nearly starving, and immigrating to the United States to live the American dream. So we look forward to that speaker next week. And in closing, we will now have the four-way test. Please join me in reciting the four-way test. First, is it the truth? Second, is it
Fair to all concerned?
Third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
And fourth, will it
Will
be
it be beneficial to all concerned?
Again, thank you all for attending. You're welcome to stick around and just chat and talk with Mary. We'll hopefully see you all next week at the noon meeting. Thank you.